So welcome back to another episode of Time Out with the Sports Doctor podcast. I'm very excited to share this episode with you. This is actually an interview that I did on another person's YouTube channel. So Jency Riley, who is a tight end at Jackson State University, invited me onto his show to discuss injuries and ACL tears, as well as ACL recovery. And it's a very candid conversation about not only what athletes have to endure from a surgical standpoint, but also the mental struggles and the journey really of going from the injury to the surgery to return to play process and some of the ups and downs of that. And I think this conversation is very important for other athletes, as well as parents, trainers, agents, coaches. So everyone can really get a better understanding of what the athlete really has to endure during this whole injury process. So Life of Riley, check it out on YouTube, like, subscribe, follow him. Great young man doing some positive things, really just trying to share the story of the college athlete to enhance everybody's understanding of what they go through. You know, we get to see them on the sideline, you see them on the field, you see them on TV doing the interviews, but what do they really go through 7 days a week, to be a college athlete so that you can enjoy their performance on Saturday or Sunday or whatever it may be. So I hope you enjoy this episode. As I mentioned, go give him a follow on YouTube and support him every way you can. Now let's get into this episode.
Hey, I have a pretty special guest coming on. This guest, he needs no introduction, but I'm gonna give him an introduction. Like I said, I owe him a lot right now. He helped me out a lot. He helped and helps me out a lot. I'm gonna let him introduce himself. Shout out right now I'm about to bring on Doctor. Don't you ever come at this man and don't put Dr. Derrick Burgess. Doc, how you doing, Doc?
Man, what's going on, Jency? Glad to be here, man.
I appreciate you, Doc. I appreciate it. Like I said, I appreciate you for coming on.
Yeah,
for those of you who don't know, the people who's watching, Dr. Burgess is actually who did my surgery. Doc did my surgery. He went in my knee, cut me open, fixed me up, and he's the reason why we're going to be ready this upcoming season. So, Doc, we're going to jump straight into it. I remember, I don't know the date, but when I went, I came, I had the MRI and everything. We did the test. He was like, it's pretty good, but, we don't know. Then I got the news, tore your ACL with some other things. So then we had the follow-up appointment. And how you doing, Professor? And with the follow-up appointment, my mom came. And this isn't, for everybody in contact, this isn't Dr. Burgess' first time experiencing my mom, right? When I had the previous year, I broke my leg. She came. She was emotional. So this time, I had to have surgery, real big surgery. She came. And one thing I remember, I told Doc this last week. My mom was, she was hysterical. She was crying. And she was like, I just hope whoever's doing the surgery, they know what they're doing. And Doc, like he looked, he was like, well, I'm doing it. He let her know that he's the one doing the surgery. And then she looked and she was like, you know what you're doing? And don't let that smile fool you. Doc had a straight face and he said, oh yeah, this is what I do. So, like I said, that was a moment I could show Doc for a minute. And then even prior to that last season, Texas State, the ambulance ride, for those you don't know, Doc was side by side with me at the ambulance. So like I said, Dr. Burgess has been a real big part of my time here at Jackson State. So Doc, I'm gonna let you give us some facts. How long have you been? What's the title? What is your official title?
My official title is I'm an assistant professor of orthopedic surgery and sports medicine. I work at the University of Mississippi Medical Center. I've been doing sports now for 13 years. So I started out. So I don't know how much people know about orthopedics. So I'm just going to go through kind of the track to get there. And then we can talk about what it is to be an orthopedic surgeon. But so I after graduating high school, went to Xavier University, Louisiana and New Orleans for 4 years. Then I went to Howard University College of Medicine for 4 years. I had 1 year in between starting orthopedics. So I did 1 year general surgery and then 5 years of orthopedic surgery training, all at Howard University Hospital, and 1 year fellowship with Cincinnati Sports Medicine. I worked with the Bengals that year, and that's when I really learned sports medicine. So add that all up, there's 15 years of training after high school to start the career. So after, I've been working, and I started working with Jackson State. We're about to enter the fourth spring training with Jackson
Okay.
State. So yeah,
Okay. So
it's fun because, you guys now that are going into like your senior year or the seniors, I've been here just about as long as most of you guys have been now. So the relationship, especially like with you mentioned, we've been through some things together. So it's unfortunate when you get injured, but it's fortunate for me because that's the people that I really get to know. And, we get to form these relationships where we really know each other more so than just passing by, or, when you get injured, you're meeting me for the first time. But, we have a history, like you said.
And this connection with you travels longer than you know. I don't know if you do know, but I ran into a barber one day. I'm getting my hair cut. And I'm getting my hair cut, and he was looking at me like, "You play ball?" I was like, "Yeah, I play football." He was like, "What school you go to?" He was a friend to high school. I was like, "I play football at Jackson State." He was like, "Oh, how long you been there?" I was like, "I've been there going on 4 years." He's like, Dr. Burgess? And in the minute I looked, I was like, "Dr. Burgess, that's my guy." I was like, "That's my guy." He was like, "Yeah, I know Dr. Burgess real, he real close, real cool. I'm gonna ask him if you know you." I said, "Well, ask him." I said, "It ain't nothing like that." I said, "You can ask him if you know him. I'm pretty sure he gonna smile. He gonna tell you, yeah." So, like I said, this connection, this bond I built with you has traveled to multiple places. Like I said, that's just one place. Me being out, getting a haircut, and the guy asks, "You know Dr. Burgess?" I'm like, "Yes." Do I know Dr. Burgess?
Right.
I know Dr. Burgess pretty well.
Right.
But also, after I had the surgery, I discovered that you also have your own podcast.
Yeah.
When you talk.
Yeah.
So like tell people about that, because that was one thing I found very exciting. Seeing my doctor, the man who did my surgery, he's real passionate about his podcast and the topics that you cover. So just I'm gonna let you tell people, hopefully some people go over there support you. But
sure,
tell us
man,
about
I
that.
appreciate that. You see behind me, TimeOut with the Sports Doctor podcast. So I started my podcast Father's Day 2021. So, I'm closing in on 4 years. And the reason why I started a podcast because I'm a first generation physician. I'm from Muscle Shoals, Alabama. And people like me don't end up as orthopedic surgeons generally, right? So we make up less than 2% of practicing orthopedic surgeons in the country are African American or identify themselves as Black. So as I went through the training, it's a long course, and then started my career, I realized that it was a lot of things that my peers knew that I didn't know. So I wanted to start the podcast, number one, to be able to share my journey. And also I had failures along the way, but I still became an orthopedic surgeon. So I think it's important for people to know that you don't have to be perfect to achieve whatever dream you have, number one, as well as I want to bring on other people who they can share whatever, journey they had with people like you, right? With other athletes, other college students, other young professionals who might think that it's unachievable. But when you can see somebody else that's done it, then it makes it more realistic to you. So that's really why I started my podcast. I interview people like you, athletes, entrepreneurs, other physicians, and we really talk about life. We do talk some about medicine, but it's more about mindset, helping you achieve success in your life, things of that nature. So TimeOut with the Sports Doctor is on all platforms. Go check me out. I'm on Instagram, YouTube. So yeah, I'll be glad to connect with anyone.
Yeah, like I said, man, when I've seen that, because after I had the surgery, I did my research. I was like, well, let me see who exactly is Dr. Burgess. Like I said, I've had many appointments with Dr. Burgess, but this is my first surgery. This is my ACL, my first surgery. So after I was like, well, let me see. And I came across it, and I gave him a few watches and listens, and I was like, man, this is very calming. Like I said, seeing you talk about it and be as confident as you are and what you do and how you do it, it was real. It was a blessing at the same time.
Yeah, I appreciate that.
Like I said. But, okay, so the people on here, right, August 23rd, 2024, I go to the hospital at, 4 or 5 in the morning. I have my schedule with Doc. Now, Doc, without saying too much,
sure,
can you talk to us, me and the people, about what's the preparation like for a surgery like that? I'm pretty sure you've done it before, but what's the preparation for, a major knee surgery, an athlete, and how do you go about that? How does your day go with that?
Yeah, out of your total protection, we won't talk about you specifically at all, but I'll talk about ACLs. I'll talk about what do we see with ACLs. So let's just talk about the presentation, right? So you get injured, you come over the first day, and many times the first day, your knee might look normal, even though it might not feel completely normal, because right after the injury, it takes a while before the swelling kicks in, which also comes along with the weakness. So I see you a couple of hours after your injury, it's going to look completely different than if I see you the 24 to 48 hours after. So right when we have that injury, you come in, you give me the history. Many times you're going to have a pop, right? So it's going to, about 70% of ACL injuries are called non-contact injuries, meaning that it doesn't happen when somebody tackles you. It happens when you try to plant your foot in the ground or change direction or things of that nature. So it's a non-contact injury generally, followed by swelling and stiffness in the knee, and sometimes looseness in the knee. One of the most common things is somebody's going to come in and they'll say, I felt a couple of pops. And then, I made up to try to get up and my knee gave out on me, something of that nature. And so that's why we get x-rays, number one, to make sure you didn't break something, but an MRI helps us look at the ligaments. It helps me look at the meniscus, as well as the cartilage, which is the lining of the joint. So it's one thing to tear your ACL alone, but many times when you tear your ACL, you can also injure the meniscus, which is the kind of the pillow on the knee, or as well as the cartilage, which I call that the covering on the bone, almost like the enamel on your teeth. So those are the three things we're usually looking at: a ligament injury, a meniscus tear, and also a cartilage injury. So going from the injury to getting ready for surgery. So we talked about being stiff and being weak. So typically we're going to do what we call prehab, or physical therapy before your surgery, for a couple of weeks to decrease that swelling so you can start moving and bending your knee well and start walking normally. Because if you go to surgery stiff, it's going to be harder to get your motion back after surgery. So those are all the things that's kind of leading up to the day of surgery. So then you arrive at surgery early in the morning, like you were talking about, and we have our last conversations. I always want to make sure that you understand what you're getting into, right? Make sure you understand how long this rehab process is going to be, because you're really putting your career on the shelf for almost a year, 9 to 12 months, give or take, to be able to get back to full strength. So I really want you to understand what we're undergoing before the surgery, because afterwards it's too late. You're already too deep in the game at that point. But it's a lot to think about. So, just talk about a little bit yourself. What was that mental preparation like for you?
Okay, so I have the MRI, and it's crazy. I think about this all the time. I have the MRI, and they put mine. This is my first time having the MRI. So the lady lays me down. I go in the machine, and I just remember I woke up. I wake up, and she said, "We'll have your results in I think she said 20, 25 minutes, something like that."
Mm.
She was like, if you want to stick around, you could get them, or you could go. We'll talk to your trainer, and you'll go on from there. So afterwards, like I said, the initial process, I'm assuming it's nothing serious, right? It's just a nick, or, nothing too crazy. So I said, no, I'm fine, I'll go. So I go home, and I'm still thinking I'm about to get ready to go to practice, maybe take about 2 weeks off, So I go up to the facility, and I see Miss Ari. And I pick my head in the training room, and she was having a conversation. She seen me, and she smiled. She said, "Yeah, I'll talk to you in a few." That was my first red flag. Because normally, Doc, if it's nothing serious, right, it's okay, you go, I'll talk to you. It's a go on and get on out the way. So I said, okay. So I go to my locker, I get ready for the team meeting. We had a team meeting. And our other head trainer, Mr. Mark, comes in. And he said, "Yeah, Jency, Coach O want to speak with you in his office." All right, that's red flag number 2. I'm like, okay, because Coach O.
Everybody acting weird, right?
Yeah, everybody acting weird. And people know me and Coach O have a pretty great relationship, So I'm like, if Coach O want to talk to me, he wouldn't send somebody to come get me. He would just come and get me, and that'll be that. So I'm like, okay, cool. So I walk out and I go to his office, and I see him and Miss Ari walking side by side. So now I'm looking like, okay. I'm like, okay, so what's really going on? So we finally get to the office, and I look at him, I'm like, is everything all right? He's like, yeah, everything all right. So I get in, and Ms. Ari asks, she said, okay, so what happened? I said, I had the x-ray. Well, the other guy came in before you. He did a couple tests, make sure. He said, everything looks good. I have the x-ray. I have the MRI. That's that. She was like, yeah. And she was listening. So she said, well, your MRI said that you tore your ACL. And I was like, wow. I was just like, wow. Like, is this really, I tore my ACL, and this is something that I hear about. You hear about people tearing their ACL and this and that. So now I'm like, I'm experiencing this. I'm experiencing the conversation that comes with it. So you tear your ACL, you tore your ACL, surgery, you're going to have surgery, this, that, and that. And all I can remember is looking at Coach O, and he looked at me. He just put his head down. He just put his head down, and I tried my best not to cry. I tried my best. I held it in as long as I could, but then the tears came out. Miss R stepped out. Me and Coach O have a conversation. Now, in that conversation, he was basically saying, because this past season was initially supposed to be my last season. I had been 4 years. I haven't redshirted. I was just going to be my last year and everything with that. So he was like, you have to look at it from a different point of view. You get an extra year to play football. You graduate. You'll come back. You'll be in school for your master's. He was like, trust me. He was like, I know this may sound messed up, but this is a blessing in disguise. So in that conversation, you know what he said. You talked to your mom yet? And when he said that, I started laughing. All I did, I laughed, and I'm crying, but I'm laughing. And so he called my mom, and he told my mom the news. And you would have thought my mom was the one having the knee surgery. My mom was on the phone, and she was real sad. So we had that conversation. I go back to the room. I talk to my mama, and I go to sleep. And I wake up, and I remember I woke up, and I started getting ready for practice the next day because it was dark. I had slept for so long. And I look at the phone, and I'm like, no, it's not time. Then the hit comes back. Okay. So then the next day, that's when I go back to the facility. And Ari was told me, she said, we're going to start prehab. Like, you bring up prehab. And I'm like, what is prehab? You always hear about rehab. Everybody knows about rehab, but nobody is ready to hear about prehab. She was like, this is what you do before the surgery to make sure everything is all right and make sure that you have a better time post-surgery with this. So I'm like, cool. So, yeah, mentally, it was tough. It had its days, especially after the surgery. Just when you wake up, off the medicine and you kind of come to your senses and you look at your leg, and it's all bandaged up. You got like 2 layers of bandages on them. You can't really move it. You can't feel much. So it's like, man, it's like that's the tough part. So like I said, there were some days where I was like, man, it's real sad. But then ultimately, like you say, you get the small win. So you go from not being able to feel your leg, so I could feel my toes. You go from not being able to feel it to I could feel my knee and stuff. And slowly but surely, I'm walking around with a limp. And I'm trying, then I'm walking, and now I'm running. So it's like it taught me to appreciate the small. Like I said, just simply getting up out my bed and be able to stand up on 2 feet. I couldn't do that for a minute after the surgery. So yeah, mentally it was tough. And I had those days where I was just like, man, this is really it. This is my next 9 to 12 months. So yeah, man, it was tough. Like I said, it was real tough.
But I think it's really important, and shout out to you for sharing your journey because it's tough for an athlete, right? So you're on a team, you're part of a team, you're going into your senior year, you're a starter, a lot of guys are dependent on you. So you're thinking about all of this at the same time. You're thinking about, okay, what does this mean to my career? Will I be able to get back? So it's a lot that you have to process. And many times I feel that athletes are having to process it on their own. So, being in a supportive environment like Jackson State, where you have Coach O and you have coaches that care about you, is different, and where you have your trainer who's going to walk you through this process, that all matters because it can be a lonely place for an athlete when okay, is my scholarship good? Like, will I be packing up my boxes to go home? How do I pay for school if I don't have football? So it's a lot. And, I don't think there's enough support for athletes going through injuries because you're isolated from your team. They're doing their own thing. You're doing your rehab. Many times it's by yourself. And that can be mental struggles. That can be, you're already struggling physically, but it can be tough on the athlete. So I always try to make sure that you understand really what you're getting into and try to support you as much. Like the other day I had you talk to a young athlete who was just starting the journey. Now that you're further along, to be able to say, look, it's going to be all right. This is what you can expect. This is what, at this time you should be able to do this. At this time you should be able to, so you'll know that it's going to get better because the first week is terrible, right? It's painful. You can't help yourself. Other people trying to take care of you. Your mama wants you to be home. You want to be on campus. So all those things.
Yeah. And even with last week, when I spoke with the other athlete, like seeing him, I just remember when there was me. I remember that first day when I finally had the courage, like, let's try to walk. Like, let's take a step. And then I took more steps. And I was like, okay, I need to lay back down. and ain't feeling too good. So like I remember that and seeing him and knowing where he will eventually be. Like eventually he'll be at my point to where he can move, even though he's not 100% yet. He won't be at this point, but he's at that point where he's getting his confidence back. So that was a big moment for me because, like I said, I seen it, and also when I tore my ACL, like I said, the ACL is something that happens to every athlete in every sport, every league. So when I tore mine, I think the next 2 weeks, two kids, one guy from the University of Texas, he tore his ACL. And the guy from LSU, Emory, he tore his ACL.
John Emory,
and the guy from Texas A&M, he tore his ACL. And then a couple months later, Stephon Diggs, he tore his ACL. So it's like, I'm looking at it, I'm like, man, like you never know how much this happens until you're actually in it and like seeing that. And also, I seen you kind of broke down what happens. So when you tear your ACL, when you're rehabbing, when you're back in your sport, you had a greater chance of injuring the other ACL, right?
Right.
So tell us about that, and how did that kind of go into play?
Yeah. So risk of re-injury after ACL is about 5 to 6%, but it's actually slightly higher on the contralateral leg, meaning the other side, about 6 to 7%. So a lot of things go into your re-tear rate is how long you rehab, kind of what graft. So some of the main grafts are the quadriceps tendon, bone, or hamstring autograft. So in athletes, we use your own tissue. We don't use cadaver tissue because we know that the re-tear rate is significantly higher for young athletes. Now, we'll do that on adults or people who are lower impact athletes, but on athletes, you want to use your own tissue. So that's one thing that all goes into the re-tear rate. But one of the main things is how well you rehab. I'll tell athletes, it doesn't matter how well I do your surgery. If you don't do your part, you're going to remain weak and you're not going to be able to protect your knee when you go back to play. So really, once you get to a certain point in your rehab, about 6 months out, it's more about, are you ready to go back? And we look at certain metrics about, hops, jumps, your stability, your strength compared to the other leg to try to say, okay, are you ready? Can you protect your knee? Because one thing is to be back on the field, but to really be back 100% and be back to the point where you're not thinking about your knee. So many times the athletes, one reason why some athletes don't go back is the mental part of it. The fear of re-injury is real. So the fear of re-injury is one of the main quoted factors for why some athletes just say, I'm done, So that's another part of the mental struggle for an athlete coming back from a major injury.
I'm at that point. Actually, it's crazy you say 6 months. Tomorrow at 12 o'clock, February 23rd, will be 6 months since I had my surgery. So I'm at the halfway mark. So yeah, like I said, just hearing you talk about this and me actually living through it, it's crazy to me because you're talking about it in a general sense. And I'm looking at you right now like, okay, 2 months I was here. Yeah. 3 months. Yeah. 4. So now 6 months, I'm exactly at that point, like you said, where you're just trying to figure out certain things if you're ready and this, that, and that. So like I said.
Talk about some of the milestones. So when I'm telling you about your rehab, I usually break it down in the first 2 weeks or so, and then the first 6 weeks, the first 3 months, kind of talk about where you were at those points in time.
Okay. Well, it's crazy. I really don't remember, Doc. Everything happened at the same time as long as it may seem.
Yeah.
It happened like this.
Yeah.
Like as long as that process may seem, it went fast. I remember with the first home game we had. It was the game before Southern.
The Lane
College.
Lane College.
I show up to Lane College and I'm on the crutches. I'm crutching on out. I'm crutching on out versus Lane College.
Yeah.
And then I crushed on out for Southern. And I think that third home game, Grambling, matter of fact, Grambling game, I was walking. I was walking on the sideline, and everybody looking at me like, man, you was just, crushing around last week. I was like, well, that was last week,
Right.
So and that's crazy thinking about it. I can't remember, like, where was I 2 months out or 3 months? I know I was walking, right? I was walking around. I wasn't jogging, wasn't moving fast at all. I was really just walking, just getting my steps in, the step point. And even then, though, with that, what I would tell the athletes is to run your own race. Because sometimes you're going to feel like, I could do this. And then you go to do that, and you're like, nah, I'm not. You be like, I'm not even close. And I've had that. That's been the problem I've had before. Like, you feel good. You're like, okay, well, I could probably, and then you go to make that move, and you're like, hold on. All right, that was my warning. Let me sit down. Let me relax. So, yeah,
I would kind of break down the norm of, that timetable. But I do remember the first time I was coming out of the tunnel behind you, and you kind of broke out into that little jog. I was like, okay, look at him. Yeah, you didn't fall down, but it wasn't pretty. But
yeah, it wasn't. Yeah, it
you got to take your first steps, right?
Yes,
but in general, after an ACL tear, if you don't have a meniscus repair, so one thing with meniscus, when you tear your meniscus, we can either cut out the torn part, which is called a meniscectomy, partial meniscectomy, or a meniscus repair. So the things that we look at to determine whether or not we remove it or repair it is the location of the tear, how much blood supply to the tear, because if we repair it and it doesn't have a good blood supply, it's probably not going to heal. And then also the location and the size of the tear. That all goes into play. But those things that your surgeon is processing in real time during your surgery. So if you don't have a meniscus repair, you're probably on crutches for about 2 weeks. If you do have a meniscus repair, you're probably on crutches for 4 to 6 weeks. Then at that point, you're off crutches, you're off your brace, you're just kind of walking around, usually, and doing your rehab. So then you're starting to work on getting that full motion back and trying to get that quad strengthened back up. And you can talk some about how weak that quad gets afterwards. So about 3 months, you're, riding on a bike, you're doing your strengthening. In about 3 months or so, you probably start doing some jogging, and then you're going to progress from there on a treadmill or just doing some straight line jogging. At about 4 to 6 months, you can start doing some light change of direction, and then we talked about from 6 to 9 months, you're kind of running your own race, trying to introduce speed, agility, plyometrics, things of that nature.
Yeah, speaking about that quad. Now, one memory I do have is I want to say like a few days after my surgery, I crutch on in the facility, and I see Miss Ari, and she was okay, and she took the brace off, she took the bandages off. Mind you, when she took the bandages off, that was my first time seeing my knee since August 23rd at probably around 7 o'clock. About 7 o'clock that one, that was my last time seeing what my knee looked like. So she take the bandages off, and I'm looking at my knee, I'm like, man, this looks nasty. I'm just like, man, this looks nasty. You had the stitches, and I'm like, man, because at this point, like I said, I hadn't seen it since before. Right. So after that, I had seen it. And the first thing she looked at me, she said, okay, give me a leg raise. And I looked at Ms. R like, who? I was like, you talking to me? You can't be talking to me. And she was like, yeah, give me a leg raise. And I went to raise my leg, and I couldn't. Like, I felt it. But it's like my leg was like, nah. And we did our things. And eventually I got to where I could get it up a little. Not my heel wasn't coming up, but the leg was getting up a little bit. It was like
trembling, huh?
Yeah, she was like, okay. She was like, we could take that. She was like, that's a sign. And then eventually, like you said, now you see me now, I could jog. Like you said, I remember that when I did the first jog, you was like, hold on now. I remember it. I looked back at you. I was like, my bad, Doc. I was like, my bad. But I remember that in the quad, specifically the quad, it gets real weak. And me being an athlete, right? We lift weights, we do all this, but you never realize how much everything comes in together. Like when I work out, do leg workouts, I never think about specifically the quad. Me perfect. You think about the leg. You think about the whole leg. You don't think about the quad or this and that. So now that I see that how weak the quad gets, now in my head, when I work out, I think about my right leg. Let's do quad strengthening exercise. Even though this has nothing to do with that, I'm like, okay, now let me specifically work on the quad. Or the things I do at rehab on my left leg, I make sure to do with my right leg too. I'm like, well, if we're gonna do it this way, I need to do it everywhere. I don't need nothing. Because like you said, that percentage of when you come back is higher in the opposite leg. And I'm like, well, I don't want no mishaps, no more. I love Jackson State. I love going to school here. This season will be my fifth season. Well, this will be my fifth season. It's about that time for me to go on and go on. But the next phase, whether that's professionally or anything. So like I said, Doc, I really appreciate you. I really, really appreciate you coming on. Thank you so much.
No, thank you.
Everybody, shout your podcast out one more time for me, Doc.
Yeah, so Time Out with the Sports Doctor podcast. It's on all platforms. You can follow me And Dr. Derrick, the sports doctor. I'm on Instagram. Your crew is probably too young for Facebook, but also I got a YouTube channel as well. So yeah, I'll be glad to connect with you.
My mom has Facebook. Hold on, speaking of my mom, she's like my, I guess you want to say momager manager.
Tell
My
mom I
is,
said hello for sure.
She watching, so she
All right.
she's
What's
watching.
up, Mom? Yeah.
But this whole time she's texting me, and I'm gonna have to apologize for the smoke detector in the background.
You tell her it's good.
she said you need to change that. That is a big no.
Right.
You should say I apologize for the beeping, Dr. Burgess. That's what he said me to say to you. So I do apologize for you.
So I was just making sure that it wasn't beeping on my end. So we're good.
Yeah, but like I said, Doc, I appreciate you. I really, really do. Hopefully I can get you on in the future and we could talk some more about it. But before we go, who's your favorite NFL team?
I always say I'm Ravens by marriage. I'm from Alabama, so it's all about college football in Alabama, right? So okay. I grew up an Auburn fan, as you see, Bo Jackson. But yeah, I just love the sport. And what I found is that, especially in the pros, I started to cheer more for a team that I have an affiliation with. When I know players playing on the team, I'm cheering more for players than I am for a team, to be honest. So it's all good.
So this upcoming season, you're going to be cheering for Jency Riley.
That's it. Absolutely.
I like to hear that.
We're going to get that jersey somewhere on the wall, and you're going to be, saying, I'm a whatever fan. I'm a Jency Riley fan. Thank you for continuing to support this podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, then please leave a 5-star review. And if you haven't done so, subscribe so you continue to get the updated episodes. Until later, peace. Hey, TimeOut with the SportsDr. Keep our head right in the game. We ain't never stopping. You are now tuned in. Trust you don't want to miss. This is where life, sports, and medicine